now my mind is blown. No surprise, guess I should have known. Oh, now my mind is blown. No surprise, guess I should have known. You got control of me, break my barricades. Walls are crumbling, grounds they shake. You came to save, but it's way too late. Every single time you stay, I cave.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Neurodivergent News Live, where we are exploring what it means to be neurodivergent in a neurotypical world and how we can help each other navigate it. I'm your host, Deanna Brakefield, neurodivergent entrepreneur, mom, and advocate, and I'm so glad you've chosen to join us today. Whether you're tuning in live or catching the replay, this space is all about bringing real stories and actionable insights to the surface, because too often those of us who experience the world differently are left out of the conversation. So today I have with me yet again my wonderful husband, Jeremy Brakefield, parent and advocate and co-host of this show. Please, his voice is always rooted in compassion and clarity. Say hello, Jeremy.
Hello, I am Jeremy, founder of the Lionheart Kingdom and co-host of this fine show.
And we also have our inspiring co-host and friend Stone with us. He is a powerhouse of insight, and I use this word all the time, but a wellspring of creativity. He brings balance between real talk and wisdom. Stone, welcome back.
Good morning, and thank you, Deanna, for having me on. I love these conversations that we have. As a counselor, I don't get to speak about these as openly because I'm usually with clients. So this is fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to our topic today. Absolutely.
Now, we might have a special guest jump in with us in a few minutes. And if that happens, great. But if not, this is a solid conversation because today we're diving into a topic that's at the heart of connection and growth, building communities authentically. Now, authenticity is a word we hear a lot, but in the context of community building, especially for neurodivergent people, it's about more than just being real, as they say. It's about creating spaces where people can show up as their full selves without having to mask or conform. Now, too often spaces claim to be inclusive, but fall short when it comes to accessibility or representation. In authentic communities, these aren't afterthoughts. They're built into the foundation. And when we get it right, the impact can be life-changing. So today, we're going to unpack what that actually looks like in practice and why it matters so much for such a marginalized community. I'd love to throw it to you, Stone, for first thoughts.
Well, a lot of people, everyone, human beings are thinking about communities because that's what we're made of. It's a similar conversation to what if your body said, "Hey, Pinky, I'm going to go to the store while Toe, you stay here in bed and you just do what you do." It's a collective thing that happens. It's what we're looking at. So one of the things that I would like for us to explore is blue zone attributes as applicable to neurodivergence. There are some nuances. There are some things that we can discuss that can really make this conversation pop and give people some actions that they can walk away with where they can start doing this today.
Okay, so you just mentioned something that I knew about, but that Jeremy has only heard about. Actually, earlier this week, we were talking about blue zones. So do you mind enlightening us a little bit about that?
Sure. So blue zones are locations on the planet where there are typically a higher percentage of centenarians, people who live functionally beyond 100 years of age. And when I say functionally, they're still having sex, they're still eating, drinking, living normal lives. They're not infirmed. They're not encountering what the symptoms that people typically associate with aging. They have made all of those things go extinct. And so we're going to discuss some of the attributes that make this possible, this community, because they're not doing it by themselves, is being generated as part of a community.
Now, I've seen a couple of documentaries on blue zones, and you're absolutely right. There's a couple of things to note. They're typically lower technologically areas. Most of these communities are rural. But the main thing about them is they are absolutely 100% family and community centric, meaning they are constantly looking out for each other. They're involved with one another. If you want to live your life by yourself, it's definitely not someplace to go.
Yeah, exactly. And living by yourself is not really how we're designed.
Exactly. Okay, so Jeremy, first thoughts?
Well, building communities is difficult even with everybody automatically being on the same page. With us, I don't want to say it's more difficult, because it's not actually any more difficult. It may actually wind up being easier, because I feel like a large chunk of us, because of who we are, between seeing whether it's our pattern recognition or any number of a handful of additional reasons, I feel like we more naturally fall into a rhythm with each other to try and work together. So I feel like that would lend some benefit to us trying to create these communities where we can all be understood and we can all work together on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when we're talking about blue zone attributes, there are some common ingredients. I'll start with the first one because I think we should spend more time with that ingredient, which is deep, purposeful connection. It is an ingredient that is not always available in the neurodivergent community, and that's because we're different. Anything that's different, the amygdala sees it and says, okay, that's different. I need to stay away from it. It's because of our negative bias, which is what we use to try to stay alive. Some of the other ingredients are physical activity, only eating until about 80% full, very little alcohol consumption, putting your loved ones first, and so that's part of that deep, purposeful connection. Plant-based diet. As far as stress management, if you're living in an environment of stress, it's an indication that you're not living as authentically as you could. For instance, if you're neurodivergent and you're constantly masking to fit in, then you're not embodying the fullness of the blue zone ingredients. Community connection and moving naturally, these are just remixes of the same thing, which is deep, purposeful connection. So I think if we start looking at deep, purposeful connection, what does that mean? What could that entail? What could that include for our lives so that we can start to enjoy something called longevity?
No, I think that's a good point. The documentaries that I mentioned, they were showcasing these centurions, I think is the correct word. And even, 110, 115-year-old women are still hanging the laundry and pulling it in for their entire family every day. Men are still standing in the kitchen and cooking meals for 20 people because they expect the entire family to be at their table every night. It's a very different model from what we're used to seeing, where once we hit, I don't know, in our society, 70 years old, they start talking about putting you in a home and separating you from your community.
Exactly. So the conversation that we're having, especially if you're neurodivergent and you're living in the West, we're talking about you living in a completely different way, doing a complete reset from where you are right now and looking to do something different. You'd have to start thinking differently, behaving differently, and you'd need a brand new tribe to pull this off. Now, the question is not, do you have enough money, or is this going to be too difficult? The question is, what kind of life are you open to living?
Now, I do think it's important to note that the kind of communities that we're talking about, they're not going to be perfect because they are still populated by human beings, and we do make mistakes. We do have trust issues. But what we're really, really talking about here is a shared purpose. It's a lack of isolation and the ability to build trust with people that care for you and trust you.
Yeah. When I hear people talking about this isn't going to be perfect, we also have to remember that the construct that we're in right now, for a lot of people, maybe you live in a house or an apartment, you live in a Western style world where family units are isolated from one another, people are isolated from one another, and it's really difficult. For instance, if you're a fish, it's difficult for you to conceptualize what it would be like to walk on land if you've never been out of the water. And for us, it can be quite challenging to imagine, how could it be for us if we were living in a way where we were nurtured, accepted, celebrated, and our contribution was a necessary part of the evolution and the ability of a community to thrive.
Right. And I like to point out that the community that we live in the Western world, more than most places, is very much performance-based. And the communities that we're talking about, it's not about what you can give to the community because it's about support.
Yeah, look at the human body. We talk we talk about this analogy all the time. If each member in a community was analogous to a cell in the body, an organ in the body, that gives you an idea, a construct of what can be possible for the relationships that we have with one another, rather than looking at experiencing this person as self.
You're being awful quiet over here, sir.
Well, I don't want to harp on the same thing because I feel like I'm generally always saying the same thing, but it really does come down to the relationships. It's not something that's just going to be a cookie cutter. Every community has 15 rules, and you follow these 15 rules, and every community can be the exact same and can all function together. And it's a nice idea, but reality doesn't function that way. At the end of the day, the communities that we want to build, we can't cookie cutter it. Each individual one has to be a mayor, for lack of a better way to really put it, comes together with his constituents, and everybody puts in their 2 cents and decides what's best for everybody. And it really has to be that everybody talking, everybody connecting, everybody giving space for everybody to be able to talk about what they need to talk about, and not really trying to hide or subject anybody or anything to what would necessarily be something that would be a trigger circumstance for them. But until we get to that point where we're connecting on that level and actually trying to be that way, I don't think you're ever going to necessarily be able to legislate or necessarily make rules. It's we have to understand that it's the mindset of the people, and that's where that's the only place we can actually affect change at the end of the day, is changing people's mindsets to where they want to have that connection. They want to come together in that mentality. But that's just the way I see it.
Well, I hear what you're saying, Jeremy, and I'm just going to pivot just a little bit so that we can go deeper. It's not people having an aligned mindset, because mindset doesn't last. It's like similar to the petrol in your car. Once the petrol is gone, then you no longer have alignment. I think what you're alluding to is culture, and culture is something that's in the DNA. So when a group of people get together and they decide what their values are going to be, this is deeper than what are our rules and laws. We're not talking about rules and laws. Culture is something that it is an agreement that's in our DNA that gives us a construct or a perspective with which we navigate the world. And so a group of people deciding to live like that is not difficult. It's just a choice. It's a group of people getting together and saying, what is our culture? What are our values? And a lot of people don't do that. When you look at some of the utopian societies that have been created over the years, a lot of times it's by a charismatic person who has an idea and they say, this is where we're going to live and we're going to do it this way. Those don't tend to last because it was based on a person. The societies, the communities that last are those who have a shared culture, they have shared values, and each member of that community embodies those cultures, the culture and the value in the way that they think, in the way that they interact with one another. So this is very possible for neurodivergent people. We just need to get the memo and decide to come together to allow it. It's as easy as that.
I completely agree. I mean, at the end of the day, what we're talking about is building places where we are no longer excluded or traumatized for our differences, that we're building places where it's safe, where you can be you and not mask.
There's a woman in the United States. Her name is Erin. I believe she is in Washington State. And she is working with some people who are building autistic communities right there in the United States. If you want to reach out to her or find out more information, you could search online for an organization called Choose Sapphire. She owns that organization. Her business is one where she trains neurodivergent executive assistants to be more effective with their founders. So that's her business model. But she has multiple projects. Erin is a perfect person. If you're in the United States, Erin is a perfect person to speak with.
Okay. So I think that we touched on blue zones and a little bit about what makes them unique. We've dug into this idea a little bit. So a lot of us feel like we are in the process, in the neurodivergent community, and we're done with the platitudes and the trying to fit in. we're trying to build these communities. What are some of the signs that, as we're exploring them, that maybe these places we're finding haven't quite reached that level?
Well, that goes back to what we were just talking about with culture. If a group of people that we're interacting with is not able to articulate the tenets of their the tenets of their values, then there can potentially be a disconnect. You can't have a bunch of people get together and say, okay, we're going to form a community now. There's more to it. Hey, just look at the relationship that you and Jeremy have. There's an agreement as to how you're going to cohabitate in the way that you raise your children, in the way that you do business. It's the same thing for a community.
I can see that. So you talked about how some communities that are constructed, they're centered around a person, and often they don't last. So it almost sounds like we're talking about that neurodivergent communities can't be led by a singular person. It almost has to be, for lack of a better way to put it, a council leading.
Yeah, I think you're talking about governance models, and the governance model doesn't really matter.
Okay.
The reason why it doesn't matter is because if every member of the community is heard, seen, and they're able to engage in the community in a purposeful way where they're celebrated, those are all the necessary agreements. So that kind of being, the government structure could be in a dictatorship. People have this untoward idea about dictatorships. It could be in that type of environment if the dictator set it up in that way. If you look at Gaddafi before he was murdered, everyone in his country had medical care. They all had they had a place to live. Everyone was taken care of. Everyone had access to academia for learning, etc. So there are instances where this can look a little different from what we're expecting. The main thing is that we have those essential ingredients for us to come together on.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, regardless of the structure that is chosen by the group, it's really about making sure that people aren't excluded or they're no longer seen as a symbol.
Correct. And that is something that I'm making an assumption, or I'm making a broad statement here. That is something that neurodivergent people, when we get together, we're able to deliver on that. We don't tend to exclude one another because we understand the way that feels.
Now, that's not to say that some of us don't have that initial, ew, I don't want to be with you, but we tend to ignore that and push past it to see if there is actual value there.
Correct. Yeah, I know for myself, when someone is stimming close to me, it doesn't freak me out or anything. I just think, okay, well, they're stimming. They're doing what they need to regulate. But also we're we're a little bit different. We have all these things. This is our tribe. We work with people like that every day.
You are a better person than I am. I don't know. When my 18-year-old starts thumping that foot on the ground and the whole house is shaking, I want to cut his feet off. But that's just me, and I love him, so it's okay. Okay. So, Jeremy, thoughts?
Nothing right now.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I as I was thinking about this topic, one of the problems that we have in most westernized society when it comes to communities is that they're reactive. We wait until something goes wrong, and then we try to fix it and correct the issue. And the way I've always looked at that is, if a dam develops a crack. You can try all day long to repair that crack, but it's always going to leak and it's always going to be a weak spot. And so in these spaces, I almost feel like we have to be proactive rather than reactive when it comes to our individual. We have to be aware, paying attention to the people that are members of our community. Otherwise, we can't adequately care for one another.
Yeah, I've shared this analogy before. I'll share it again because it's going to connect the dots in our conversation. If, let's say that we're all living in a sewer, active sewage with chunks coming all the way up to the waist, and the persistent complaint that we have about living in the sewer is that we're always dirty. And so the scientists that are living in our sewer, we all decide, okay, well, we're gonna shower at least 10 to 15 times a day. But you got active chunks and bits coming out of the shower. You're never, ever, ever, ever going to get clean. You can't get there from where you are. You have to get out. So once you get out of the sewer, now you don't have active chunks. Now you don't have sewage. You're not wading through it. And that's the way it is with capitalism, with Western society. Western society is, with its individualism, with its for-profit drivers, is the antithesis to collectivism, which is what is necessary for us to have the ingredients sufficient for a blue zone that would be appropriate for a neurodivergent community. So we have to become different. We have to start thinking differently, because with Western ideology, it can't happen. Mm-hmm. Or it would be very, very difficult. It would be similar to what you're describing, trying to patch a crack in a dam. The solutions that we need for today are not available with the thinking that we're currently leveraging to negotiate from one moment to the next.
So, I mean, we've talked about on a couple of episodes how the inception of modern technology has actually made it much, much easier for us to form the basis for these communities. But we're also talking about blue zones today. And so with blue zones, there's a literal proximity involved. It's a location where you are off separate from the primary group with people who are similar to you and think similarly to you. Is that required for what we're talking about, or is it possible to maintain in place, as it were?
Well, if there's a community in the United States that is a blue zone, and what makes them similar is not the people group. So they're not all from the same race. They're together because of their belief systems. They're Seventh-day Adventists, and this particular location is in California. So the values, the collective values that a community decides to go forward with, is a greater predictor of longevity than whether or not they're the same race.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Jeremy, you're nodding your head. Something's rattling around in there.
Well, I mean, it's the way a people live together among each other, that's going to kind of dictate their longevity. I mean, because most people that live in the same socioeconomic circle, they're going to have the same sort of life expectancy and the same life circumstances. So if you have an entire section that finds essentially the secret to good living, and they all share it among themselves and they're all following it, then you're going to have this amazing area. It's just, we got to find out what that is. What are the specific things that they're doing that lets them have that?
Well, no, I think it's interesting what Stone's talking about here is because so many blue zones, you know, everybody in the community is your second or third cousin or so on and so forth. You're related. And so much of what we think about in longevity is tied directly to your genetics. So what he's saying is we've got a community where they're not closely interrelated. There's not a genetic map, for lack of a better way to put it. And they're still experiencing this.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's completely possible. I'll give a personal example. When I got out of the military and I was migrating to Australia, I had all these plans for how I was going to do that, and I didn't move until I thought that I needed to have a job. I needed to have all these things lined up. I needed to be generating a certain level of revenue, etc. And really all that was necessary was for me to move, get on a plane and go. And once I made that decision, everything lined up. Where I was going to live, how I was going to make a living, so on and so forth. I give that really simple example as an analogy for how easy it is for us to get together. We don't have to have all these complicated plans. We just need to have a default tenant. Maybe our default tenant is, and when I say we, I'm talking about anyone who's listening to this and deciding that they want to generate their own community. Here's a way that you can start. If we look at what is it that's below a cell? What is it that's below an atom? What are we made of? It's love. So if we decide that one of the decision criteria in how we come together and how we make decisions is going to be love, that's a great place to start. From there, you can come up with all of the flavors, with all of the nuances, with all the ABCs that you want. But that guiding principle, that northern light, it's a place for people to start. And at this particular moment in time, all of us have sufficient resources and access to knowledge, education, thought leadership, where we can do this right now. It just takes a group of people to say, let's start.
I completely agree. I mean, and you're talking, earlier you said that we have to define our values as a group. And I think that what you just said is the primary value of not every, but most indie communities that get started is they did not feel love. And so they are seeking love from other people that did not feel love.
Yeah, that's interesting. We don't always have to do that. We can. It's similar to if you know that you're hungry, if you know that you need to eat, and you eat so that you can be healthy. Well, then you just eat. We as human beings know that we need community. We need it for our growth. We need it for our education. We need it for everything that sustains us and enables us to expand. So we don't have to do it because something is missing. We do it just because that's the natural direction of being human.
Well, I mean, the most basic model of community is two parents and a child. Like, that's the most basic model. Yes, it's a nuclear model, but it's the most basic one. Where do most people learn love? At the breast of their mother, or rather, they should. And I think it's interesting that you used eating as an example because, personal example, I have ADHD. There will be times I'll be sitting at my desk. My stomach is actively growling. Nothing is keeping me from going to the kitchen except for a lack of action. For whatever reason, the action is not the push to go and eat is not there. In fact, it is actively anti-eating at times because nothing is fulfilling or satisfying. And I think it's the same way with a lot of neurodivergent individuals when it comes to community. We know we need other people, but we don't act.
That's a wonderful example. Let's take that specific example and let's blow it out a little bit. I wonder what would happen if in that scenario where your stomach is growling, if there was a schedule, and we can change the word schedule to a ritual. What if there was a ritual that was based on whatever criteria you want? It could be time, it could be noonday, it could be when you wake up, it could be 3 or 4 hours before the sun is meant to set. But that ritual meant that you were going to get together with other people and break bread at particular times, and you align those times to your rhythm, to your circadian rhythm. So what I've just described, and I said, what if, is part of your culture. And it started with values. So you might speak with Jeremy and say, well, part of our values is that we're going to embody well-being physically, spiritually, and as a couple, when people look at us, they're going to notice us and know what love looks like, how it sounds, how it feels. They're going to readily be able to identify that. And so if you were to become curious and start asking these questions, then it would no longer be you by yourself, but the family rituals and culture that you've created based on your values now eradicate that particular symptom.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying. So a real world example would be, and assuming we're talking about a small group like a family, Jeremy knows that I have a tendency not to feed myself despite recognizing that I need nutrition. So we decide as a couple, we're going to have family meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, everybody at the same table. That becomes ritual. And so stop thinking about, I have to feed myself. What am I going to eat? And it becomes, it's time to be a community. I get to interact with people. It just so happens that I'm feeding myself while it happens.
That's right. And when you get together, it's not a circumstance of checking in. Maybe you're looking for opportunities to edify one another so that not only are you feeding your physical temple, your spiritual temple, the connections and relationships are also getting filled up.
So you're killing more than two birds with one stone at that point.
Well, if you want to kill stuff, all right.
Just to use an old analogy, or not an analogy. What is that word called? I'm not even going to try.
Euphemism.
An old euphemism. There we go.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, so what I'm really hearing, though, is it's not about mindset. It's about transparency and safety. You have to feel safe with your community at the end of the day. Otherwise, you're not going to benefit from the connection.
Yeah, I suppose that is one attribute of it. And also in this conversation, we're not trying to figure things out. We're merely having a conversation. we're talking out loud. We're not telling the listeners this is the way you do it. We're merely suggesting, hey, how could it be? Because myself personally, I don't live in a blue zone. I've never lived in a blue zone. I've studied it extensively. I've read about it. I don't know. I have a sort of I really look forward to creating one. But I don't know exactly how it would be because I haven't done it yet. But maybe we don't need to know. We just need to know the way love works. How does it feel inside us? How does it sound?
And I think it's important to point out here that while we are talking about love as the primary foundational building block here, love doesn't always feel the same. The way
Correct.
that people experience love varies across the spectrum, just like we do.
That's right. That's right. And that's a wonderful thing because it would be a shame if there was only vanilla ice cream.
Look, vanilla may be the most popular flavor in the world, but it doesn't make it the best.
That's right. That's right. There are plenty of other flavors, and you're 100% correct. That is absolutely the way love moves. Lots of diversity.
Okay, so outside of love and communication and understanding, what are some other underlying things that we see that lead to authenticity?
Yeah, well, we've touched on that a little bit already with culture and values. When we look at the way the Western world is right now, there is a normalcy that is expected. There's a way that societies are meant to behave. And if you don't behave in that way, then you're excluded, i.e. neurodivergence. We're excluded because we don't behave or think the way everyone else does. And what that introduces is masking and internalized ableism.
So a lack of diversity leads to a lot of the issues that we have. I've noticed in my own personal experiences that in many, many communities, if your voice doesn't match the voice of leadership or the voice of the horde, as it were, then that is when you begin to experience the shame that leads to masking.
Well, what if one of the foundations of the community is diversity? So it wouldn't matter if everyone was sounding like a few. And what if the governance system wasn't hierarchical? It wasn't a hierarchy. What if it was flat?
Well, that's a mind-blowing thought.
So there are multiple instances. What we know today, what we know right now that is fact, is that capitalism in its current form is a cancer. It will never, ever, ever last because it is based in consumption. When you look at the Western model compared with the Chinese, who have 100-year plan for how they are contributing to the planet, how they're contributing to their people. Contrast that by the myopic idiocy of Western governance. They focus primarily on staying in power, not on governance, not on making sure that the people that elected them are being taken care of. And it's because of the model, it's the system that they're in. Once they're in that system, all they want to do is stay in power. So how could they ever do something that's going to contribute to the community? So we talked about the sewer analogy earlier, and so we can already see the way the Chinese are governing themselves and the way they think about the world, they're global players. They contribute in almost every space on the planet. I mean, you go to any major city and there's a Chinatown. Not so in Western society, Western culture. So there are some things that we can do. As far as being authentic, being in a community where you can be authentic, that still is an attribute of the values from which the culture is designed.
Well, I mean, I almost feel like, and you know, you and I both, we own our own marketing agencies. That's what we do in the real world outside of you being a counselor. But I almost feel like we have to treat authenticity like a marketing tactic and not overpromise and underdeliver. And what I mean by that is we have to essentially, it's like we're trying to date the rest of the world and show them why our model is the best one out there and why they should ascribe to what we're doing. But we have to be really careful not to be altruistic and overpromise what's coming.
Yeah, I don't think that part is particularly necessary. So
okay.
you're because you're using a marketing example. And we're talking about communities. With a community, we're not trying to get everyone. We're only looking to allow those that might have the same vibrational frequency. It's like you and Jeremy. You're not in a polyamorous relationship. It's just the both of you with your children. That was the agreement. And so, in a similar way, when we're creating communities, here are the values, here's the culture, and if you don't have that belief system, if this doesn't align with the way you want to live, if longevity or being a centenarian is not something that's interesting to you, then you don't have to participate. We're not forcing you to engage.
And I think it's also important to note that, you know, we're not saying that if you find the perfect authentic community that you're going to live to 100, 120 years. No, but we're talking about quality of life, because so many of the conversations we have here center around lack of quality of life leads to lesser longevity.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It would be interesting for us to be able to interview people who are doing exactly what we're talking about. And I do know some people in the United States who are doing that, and maybe we should tee up a conversation with them so that we could further this idea.
I could get down with that, because they're going to have a lot of real world experience that for those of us on this having this conversation right now is all theoretical.
Yeah, we're both in contact with Kara. We should and she's definitely a connector. We should have her in this chat.
Well, we tried to get her to join us today, but she is a busy lady. She's absolutely amazing, but definitely busy.
Yeah, she is.
Okay, Jeremy, you are being very quiet with that finger up on your face as you're watching us smiling maniacally. So I'd love to know what's rattling around in that head.
Well, I'm kind of fixated on capitalism.
I knew that was where you were going to get hung up.
Because I'm very, very specific on this because a lot of people, when they talk about capitalism, they're not talking about capitalism. They're talking about the current system of governance that's in the West, which is not capitalism. And it agitates me and angers me when people try to put the two together. All capitalism is, at the end of the day, is doing the best you can with what you currently have. All of the idea that has come along of this one hand washes the other and the people at the top keeping people down, that's not capitalism. That's some bastardization of it. That's crony capitalism. That's something else. At the end of the day, the base philosophy is just do what you can with the best that you can. But it drives me crazy to no end when people want to lump in all of the horribles of what we currently have in the West as capitalism. Most of what you see in the West, that's not capitalism. That's corporatism. That's bureaucracy and a whole lot of other stuff gets added on to capitalism and then gets some sort of I don't know, it melts together or something where people feel like the two can't be separated. But the two are completely separate. And that's kind of my issue, is that capitalism is this scapegoat for the West. If you want to denigrate the West, if you want to talk about the West, then just talk about capitalism. And that's not capitalism. What's going on there is not capitalism. Capitalism is you make something. It's something that helps people. So you're going to go out and you're going to sell it the best you can to the people that need it. Not you're going to try and keep anybody else that makes something similar to you from making it and being able to sell it. No, that's not capitalism. That's something else. And that's my soapbox for the day.
I think you've touched on something important, though, because we have all of these models throughout human history. Whether we're talking capitalism, democracy, socialism, communism, it doesn't matter. We feel it's almost like we feel like we have to use one of these models to build our future communities and societies. And that is absolutely not the case, because at one point in human history, none of these models existed.
I guess I'd want to point out that, sure, there is some truth to what Jeremy is talking about. There are different versions of capitalism. But if we look at the collective result of what we currently have, not the idealized version of what we want, but the result of what we have, you can look at the desertification process that's happening on the African continent because of the multitude of global corporations that go in there and extract resources without any care for the people or the animals or anything that's living there. Same thing happens in the United States. Look at the state of our oceans. Look at how we cause the extinction of animals and plant life. That, regardless of what version of capitalism you want to call it, is capitalism. And that is human beings. So we can choose to argue about the etymology of it or the idea of a word, or we can live differently.
And I think that's what I meant when I said we don't have to follow any of the models that have come before, because there are, outside of blue zones, there aren't very many truly authentic communities in the human spectrum. That tells me we have to build something new that hasn't been done before.
Well, it's probably been done before. We just forgot.
Good point.
Otherwise, the idea of a blue zone is from antiquities. This is how we used to live. Mm-hmm. This is how we're designed to live.
Okay, so we are coming close to our time. Jeremy, I'd love to hear any last thoughts you have. Or have we not moved past our soapbox yet?
I almost feel like I need to. I think it's a line from Shakespeare. I don't come to say the West is great and that it's the end all be all or anything, but it's just, for me, we need to stop allowing people to just stuff stuff together, put the label on it they want, and stick it out there, that we need to chop the things apart. And if you're going to talk about something, you need to be specific about what you're talking about, especially when it comes to autistic individuals like us. Because when I specifically say, because I don't want to keep soapboxing, but like when I say capitalism, I'm talking about that very, very specific niche of doing the best you can with what you have. Like your example, where they go out and they do whatever and they have no care for the oceans. That's not capitalism. Because when you don't have that care, you are not doing the best that you can with what you have. At that point, you are no longer doing that. You're doing something else. And that's my issue. But me and Deanna have had exceptionally long conversations, and a lot of the stuff is, it's a fine system until you add the human element. And for most systems, whether you talk about capitalism or socialism, and you can probably throw a few more in there, they're fine systems until you add the human element. The human element in most cases is what winds up causing the issues, because as individual people, we're fine, we're loving, we're faithful, we're helpful, we're kind, we're compassionate. But as large groups, we're ignorant, we're dangerous, and we will do nothing but destroy the world. And the thing is that we have to understand that. When the statement, you can't see the forest for the trees make up the forest. And that's what we're looking at. Individually, we can do great things. When we start putting more than 2 to 3 of us together, we start looking for reasons to fight. We have to change that. Until we change that, it doesn't matter. Nothing else actually matters, because we can come up with whatever ideological stance that we want that's going to be a good thing. But until we change that, 3 people in a room, somebody's got to be right, somebody's got to be wrong, somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose. Until we can, as a species, begin to put that trait to the side, it's not actually going to fix anything.
And I think you're completely correct, because that's circles us back to the beginning of this conversation, where we were talking about everything done through love. Did we lose Stone? Did he freeze on us? Oh, no.
No, I'm listening. I'm listening to what's being shared. Yeah, this is great.
And I think that's one factor about blue zones that is very different from modern society, is that they are interconnected and love for one another and care for one another in a way that the greater breadth of humanity has forgotten.
Yeah, there's a utilitarianism that's embedded in their culture, and utilitarianism doesn't always exist in Western society.
Well, I would love to hear your last thoughts before we wrap up for the day, because, I mean, you have carried this conversation, sir. You've given so much wonderful insight to it.
I'm biased. I really am. I believe that we as a community, if we could be a community, our best opportunity to thrive is to form these blue zones, and to not wait till certain things line up, that we should get together with what we already have. And I trust that our listeners are going to reach out to you and say, hey, I'm in, let's do something. and that we could start. It doesn't have to be pretty. We just have to start.
I think what I heard is stop being reactive to the people that are around you and trying to survive, and start planning for a brighter future and making those steps, even if the time doesn't feel right.
Yeah, we can do that too. That's fantastic.
All right. Well, this has been another episode of Neurodivergent News Live. We've absolutely enjoyed having everyone here again today. Next week, we will be diving on into our next topic, as we always do, the neurodivergent superpower story, honoring our limitations without shame. And I think that'll be a really good place to build off of from this week, where we're talking about starting to build those communities. So understanding where our limitations are without feeling bad about it, I think that'll be a really great place to move to. As I said, this has been another episode. Everybody have a great and wonderful week. We will see you back, same time, same place, 5 p.m. Central next Sunday.
You got control of me, break my
Bye.